Hey, hello there, and thanks for joining me. Welcome back. I have a kit here that I have literally had sitting on a shelf for 30 years. I got this vinyl kit in 1993 of Boba Fett, assembled it, never got around to painting it. It has literally traveled with me for 30 years, sitting on a shelf, unpainted, and I figured it's about time I do this guy. So this is a vinyl kit. I never fully secured the arm here because I knew I needed to paint the underside and paint his chest plate. The gun is also not secured, so I can pull the gun out and get that fully painted and put it back before finally fully assembling and attaching the arm permanently. The head will also come off, so I can paint that separately if I need to. So I've gone as usual and I've primed all of this with my Tamiya Fine Gray primer. I like this gray color. I think I'm going to use it for the clothing. It closely matches the color of his clothes in the film. I have a bunch of reference photos I've grabbed from online that I'm going to be using, screen grabs from the movie and such, to try to get it as close as possible to the way it looked. The one thing I don't understand about this kit, it does not have the dent here, that famous dent in his helmet, so I'm gonna have to add that myself. So I'm just gonna take a drill bit and slowly just kind of drill into his head here to make a divot and make that dent in the helmet there. And I think that's looking pretty good. It's pretty much in the right spot, I believe. It may not be perfectly in the right spot or exactly the right size, but that'll definitely do. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paint the orangish yellow areas around his armor, his shoulder pads and his knee pads. I'm going to go ahead and paint those up first, and I got the other one up here. I have them all taped off so that I can airbrush the paint on there. So I'm going to go ahead and start airbrushing here with a mix I did of Tamiya flat yellow, and I did just like a drop or two of flat red in there just to give it a slight orangish tint rather than just purely flat yellow, and you can see how that looks there. It's definitely not just yellow, but it's got a little tint to it. And there's all the pads all airbrushed nice and clean and neat. And then it's just removing the tape from all these guys. And there you go. The back of the legs here, we've got this strap that should be a little bit of a darker gray. I'm going to go ahead and just hand paint that in, and I'm going to use some Tamiya medium gray, so that'll stand out and separate from the rest of the light gray clothing that he's got there. And there's both of those painted up. Then I'm going to continue on to the armor. I've got everything taped off here for the armor. Again, I'm going to airbrush this. I've taped it off so it'll be nice and clean and neat around the edges. For this, I'm going to use my own mix of Tamiya deep green with a few drops of medium gray, just to give it a slightly different shade there. And then I'm going to go ahead and start airbrushing on the armor here. My mix may have been a little too thick, it's kind of spotting, but because I'm doing solid, it's not going to make much of a difference. I'm not using it for shading or anything like that. So here we've got it all painted up, all the armor on the front. And again, it's just removing all the tape off of here, and we'll see how it looks, and it should be nice, clean, sharp lines all around the armor. And there it is, and that's looking really nice. I like the way this armor has turned out. Now I'm going to move on to the gauntlets on his arms. This is again another mix. I'm going to do some flat red with just a little bit of some red brown thrown in there to tone it down, give it a little more darker burgundy look. So I'm just going to go around and airbrush these gauntlets. And I like the way these have turned out. Those look really nice as well. I like the color red I got there. And then with weathering and stuff like that, it'll even tone it down a little bit more. And once I add all the chipping. So the helmet, I've got that primed gray as well. For the helmet, I'm using flat green with a little JA green and medium gray mixed in there. Again, another mix I've done myself. So I'm going to go ahead and airbrush this green on here. And again, some of the paint is a little thicker than I'd like. There's little spots there, but it comes out nice and even, so it's not noticeable in this particular case. But there I've got the primary areas that I wanted painted green. I've taped off. I'm going to do the darker green color here inside the front of the helmet, and I've used some of my liquid latex to mask off the bottom portion since it's round. I'm going to paint that with this green, and you can see the two different tones of green going on there. And now I've taped it off once again so I can do the red around the helmet. I'm going to use the same color red that I did for the gauntlets. It's just, again, flat red with a little bit of red brown added in there to give it a little more darker, deeper burgundy-ish color red going on there. And there we've got the red done around the helmet. And finally, I've taped everything else off, and I'm going to do the black. I'm going to use Tamiya gloss black for the visor on the helmet here, so that'll come out shiny. And there we basically have all the primary colors of the helmet done. Then it's just, again, weathering this up. This antenna, I cannot tell you how many times I've broken it off. Keep gluing it on, break it off, so I'm just going to leave it off till I'm done. Now we're going to move on to his jetpack on the back. I got the whole back of his body taped off. The main color, this is blue, and I'm using Tamiya Sky Blue with some drops of German gray in there. And I'm going to go ahead and airbrush that on here. And this will be most of the jetpack is this blue. This time I actually happen to make the paint a little too watery and thin, but I'll get it all on there. As you can see, I've gotten that painted up and it's nice and solid all around there, and the main parts that need to be blue. Then I've taped off some more areas, and we've got some yellow areas here. I've got that painted now. This I should have left blue, this middle stripe. Then I've taped off some more areas. I'm going to use my red again. And then taped off more, and we're just using flat white for this other middle area here. Pull all the tape off, and this is what we've got on his jetpack. Again, I need to repaint this middle here. That should be the same blue as the outside. So I've also got this area taped off. This should be like a darker gray stripe. I'm using German gray up here for this stripe around the top edge. And then I'm using some flat aluminum for these areas on either side of the jetpack, as well as these little things that stick up here. Then I've got some more tape off areas here. I'm going to use once again my brown, or my red with red brown paint to paint these areas that should be painted that color. And then these jet areas here I've painted with flat aluminum, as well as his rocket up top. Moving on to his gloves, there are some stripes in here. I'm using the same green that I did for the armor. I'm going to use that same green color and just follow these lines and hand paint them in on his gloves for that green there. For his boots, I'm going to start out with the main color, and I'm going to do his boots up with Tamiya German Gray. That will be the main base color for his boots. Then I'm using some deck tan for this little area on the top, and some Tamiya green mixture for those stripes, and some NATO black on the side stripes and soles of his boots. So you can see how that's all looking there. I've gone and I've painted his rope with the same red. I've used leather brown for his pouches here. The red brown color again for the rope, and also Tamiya deck tan for these side pouches. Same color deck tan that I used here above the boots, I've used on his pouches on the side. Also painted the back side. I've also done flat aluminum on these little portions here on either side of his knee pads. Also painted some flat aluminum for these little tools that he has in the pouches in his pants. I've gone again and done some German gray in some areas on his gauntlets. I've painted this little rocket with flat aluminum. That's some copper there. Again, some German gray for a button. German gray up front here. Same with the other side. Some German gray for the cables on the back, those hoses, as well as the buttons on the gauntlet. Some flat aluminum for those little rocket pieces there in the front. I've also painted this rope with a white with a little bit of deck tan and yellow, just to offset the white a little bit, with that one red rope mixed in the middle there. And then I've also added the detail on his rockets here with some German gray and a little bit of red, and then more of the flat aluminum. Gonna airbrush a little shading on his pants here with some Tamiya medium gray. You can see some of that subtle shading going on there. It's just a little darker in there to add some depth to the folds and wrinkles in the clothing. A little bit of gray I've gotten on the ropes, makes it look just kind of faded and dirty. I've also done a little bit in his pouches on the side, and done some in the folds and creases in the rest of the clothing as well. Now I've gone and I've given him a gloss coat so that I can finish doing weathering on him, as well as putting the few decals we've got. I need to get those attached to him, so I've painted them with gloss for that. So here's the decal sheet. Of course, we have our two most famous logos here, which I'm going to start out with first. And I'm going to go ahead and start out with his shoulder pad logo with the mythosaur symbol. And I'm going to use some microscale microset, smear a little bit onto his shoulder pad here. Then I'm going to go ahead and apply the decal of the mythosaur. Then I've got this decal that goes on the front armor. I've got some little decals on the back here. One of them broke, but I managed to get it on and get it fixed. It looks okay. Then we've got a couple of writing decals that go on either side here in the white, and one that goes on the very top yellow portion here. And then we have these little black markings that go around the bottom portion of the rockets. Then we have, last but not least, the stripe decals that go down the side of Boba Fett's helmet. These are so old it broke on me, but I managed to piece it together and get it on there. It looks pretty decent. Hard to tell right now because it's so glossy. Now I'm going to go ahead and start doing some washes over areas. I'm going to be using German gray for most of my washes. I'll be doing that over all the gauntlet areas here, filling in all around the edges, making them look dirty and worn. And then I'm just going to dab some of that off with the sponge I have here. Makes it a little more organic looking. You can kind of see the way that's looking there. I'm going to add just a touch more. And then go over to go with that sponge and just deepen it up, add more layers. Do a wash over the gloves here, trying to get in those little creases in the gloves. Do some washes around the rest of the clothing, trying to fill in the creases and the stitch areas and things like that. And here we've got the one arm pretty much done up with all the washing anyway. It's not completed, but this is all the washing that I've done on the right arm of Boba Fett. Then I'm just going to continue doing more washes with my German gray over the rest of the clothing, picking up some of the stitching, the other gauntlet on the other arm here. Then I'm going to do some dry brushing with aluminum, flat aluminum. Try to make it look like it's been scraped up and the metal is showing through the paint. Also do just a little actual painting with the fine tip brush here to add some of the chipping effects around the gauntlet. Do the same here on the shoulder pads. I'm going to start out with some Tamiya German gray to do some dark shadow areas first, and then I'm going to go over with my flat aluminum so it gives a little depth and makes it look like there's a couple of different layers of paint there actually within the armor. Then I'm going to continue on with the armor around the body as well, do some dry brushing with my flat aluminum, make it scratched up and scraped up, add some chipping with the fine tip brush here. I'm also going to use this sponge and do some of the sponge technique where you just put the sponge in the paint and then just kind of dab the sponge on, and it'll give it a more organic kind of chipped look around the armor. And again, some more fine tip detailed chipping. Go around the other gauntlet here with some chipping. Then I'm going to go around his packs here and use some Tamiya sand, light sand pastel to lighten up the edges and make it look like they're dirty and worn. Same technique on the knee pads here. Did some German gray. Then I'm going to go over that with the Tamiya flat aluminum. Add the chipping to these knee pads. Then I'm going to use my Tamiya soot and mud pastels and start going over areas and just adding dirt and grime and making it look like he's been through a lot. Use it on all the pads around here. Gonna use some light sand pastel around his boots, make it look like they've been dirty and worn, gone through the sands of Tatooine. Gonna use some of the soot pastels around the gauntlets, make it look kind of oily. Some sand pastels to make it look like it's got dirt settled on it. Same with his gloves, make his gloves look dirty and worn. Going to use the sponge technique on the back of the pack here with the flat aluminum. Then again, using my fine tip brush to add more detailed chipping effects. Then I'm going to use some Viejo Environment. Same thing with the sponge, add a little bit around here, make it look like it's grimy and it's been through Lord knows what. I guess not the Sarlacc yet, but who knows what he's been through. A little more grime and washing with German gray to add some more grit and depth to it. More layers of just collection of stuff. I have this Tamiya burnt blue pastel that I've done around the bottom portion of the rockets here, to give them a little like burnt metal look from them firing when he flies through the air. And then I'm going to move on to the cape, get this done. We've got the cape here. Now that the main body is done, I'm going to move on to these parts. And I'm going to airbrush the cape with just straight up Tamiya flat green, just flat green over the whole thing, so yet a slightly different shade of green than the armor and the mask. And then I've mixed some flat green with a little bit of flat white, and I'm just going to do some dry brushing, and I'm going to go over the cape with some dry brush and just pick up some of the highlights to give it a little detail in the cape. You can see that I've done that here. And then I'm going to use some of my sand pastel and go over the cape, give it some dirt areas. This also picks up some of the highlights. Just want his cape to look weathered, dirty, tattered, worn. And then I'm also going to add in a few areas just a little bit of soot and or mud pastels. Once again, make it look dirty and used. And there we've got the cape done up. Then I'm going to move on to his blaster. I've painted the entire thing with Army Painter Matte Black to begin with. I'm going to do the handle first. And I've taped off the rest of the gun, and I'm going to airbrush the handle with chocolate brown, which I've done here. Then I'm going to use a Viejo rust wash. I'm going to start going over with the fine brush areas of the gun that I want to look rusted and worn. And because of the black underneath, once this dries, it's hard to see, so I'll do several layers. Then I'm going to use my Tamiya Chrome Silver, do some dry brushing over the gun, make it look chipped, worn, been through a lot of bounty hunter battles. And then a little bit of soot pastel on the handle stock and a little bit of light sand pastel on the rest of the gun. So the soot, I'm just going to go over and just pick up the handle, a little bit of light sand on the handle, and then a little bit of light sand around the rest of the gun till we have what we've got here, a very old, battle-worn Boba Fett blaster. And at this point I've glued his right arm back on, put the gun in place, and I have that all in position. I like the way that's looking. And I've glued his cape back on to the back of his body as well, so that's all done. On his rocket here, I'm using an AK weathering pencil, and I'm trying to do this dark kind of faded look on the top here, which is the way it is in the reference photos I have. I also did a very light red wash over the rocket using the same red as the rest of the body. Tried to make it look like this reference here. For his helmet, gonna move on to that. Once again, fine tip brush, doing some chipping effects with the fine tip brush using flat aluminum. Also going to use some pastels to dirty up the helmet in addition to all the chipping. A little bit of light sand, dust and things that have settled from being in Tatooine. And there we have a finished helmet. And now it's time to put the helmet back on the body and reveal the completed model build. And I'd like to thank you for watching this build of the Kaiyodo Boba Fett model kit. Hey, if you like watching my videos, please feel free to give them a like. And so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos, click subscribe.